Now we'd kind of like to look at the effect that the power rolls have on the game, and these analyses are really quite interesting. The first one we'll examine is the vigilante, and obviously the first thing a vigilante can do is to kill on night 0, and the model of this is pretty tricky because there are 3 different paths that the model can take at this point. On the far left, you get a circumstance where the vigilante managed to shoot a mafia member. On the far right, they accidentally shot another town member. But in the middle, they actually shot somebody that mafia was going to kill anyway. So you have this overlap effect. And the fact that they can't shoot themselves makes for some interesting mathematics. We have to determine kind of the rate or the probability that you get into any one of these tracks. And I'm not going to go into the math here. It's pretty crazy. Especially when you start looking at adding the 70-30 effect to this. But you'll notice that on the one hand, you get into a track where you've got 10 and 2 left, on the far right 9 and 3 left, but in the middle you have this 10 and 3 because Mafia made their 2 kills, the vigilante shot somebody that they'd already identified, and you end up kind of right where you start in the regular flow chart. That is 10 Mafia, or 10 town and 3 Mafia. We already know what the win percentage is for that. It's a 48.4% win percentage. So we don't have to show the entire flow chart from there. We can just put those numbers in, and that's going to simplify things from here on out. Again, we multiply by our 7s and 3s, and we reduce all of these fractions down. And then we can make the calculation, and we find out that a night 0 kill actually reduces town's chance to win by about 1.5 percentage points. So not only is a night 0 kill essentially a meta play or an OGI play and frowned on heavily by the community, it also just is out and out bad for town. So this just gives you an indication that it should be highly discouraged, that night 0 kill. The next thing we look at is a night 1 kill. And night 1 kills aren't done very often because I think there's a feeling that you need to gather more information before you take your shot. But as we look at the night 1 kill, we end up with, again, this complex model that has these 3-way splits, and then we kind of know the outcome of each of those splits. And so we can just put the win percentage in each one of those and reduce our fractions. And we end up at the night 1 kill at town gaining about 5 percentage points, 53.5% win percentage at this point, and that's not too bad. So vigilante shot on night 1 actually has a nice 5% bump in town's win percentage. For night 2, we can model this, and you can see that it gets more complicated, more layers. Again, we reduce the fractions so we can make our calculations, and in night 2, we see that the win percentage isn't as good. You're actually better off taking a night 1 shot than a night 2 shot, unless, of course, you honestly believe that you've got better information on night 2 or up from day 2 than day 1. There's not enough evidence for me personally to suggest that that's necessarily true. You're better off taking a night 1 shot. You're also more likely to be around on night 1. You can't hold the threat as long, for sure, and that's certainly part of the game, is to hold the threat of the vigilante shot. But this just gives you an idea of the effect of when it's taken and what happens. On night 3, interestingly enough, here's the model, and we reduce it so we can use it. And you can see by night 3, some of the game is over by this point, but it actually raises the win percentage up a little bit better than night 2. So here, vigilante shooting on the odd nights is better than the even nights, and it's about a 5% bump that you get for that action. And of course, you want to take it before you die yourself, so act accordingly. The next thing we can model is the medic, and the medic on night 0, it's kind of a simple model. I'll show it to you. There it is. It's not very complicated, but we can see from this that a night 0 save, which you have about a 13% chance of getting that save, will actually reduce town's chance to win. Well, this seems kind of counterintuitive that it would work against town to save a town. But again, that does is it just keeps the pool from draining enough to find the mafia. It keeps it diluted, and actually has a very tiny effect in favor of mafia at that point. Getting to night 1, we see that on night 1, there's about a 15% chance that the medic can get a save. And if they do, well, here's the model. Reduce things down, and we can calculate that we get some of the percentage points back. So saving someone on night one, irrespective of everything else, bumps the win percentage by a little less than 0.5%. But that's pretty tiny. You would think the medic would have a much better impact on the game at this point, but they really don't. On night two, again, we have the model, we reduce it, and we make our calculations. And although their chance to save somebody goes up to 16%, the effect of that save is only about a 1.5% bump in town's win percentage. It's still pretty small. And on night three, although there's almost a quarter of a chance, or better than a quarter of a chance, that you could actually get a save at that point if you're still alive as medic, ultimately, here again is the model and the reduction, the win percentage still isn't that large. And so as much as we think the medic has a large mechanical effect on the game, it's actually not that large when you consider that there's a small chance to get a save and not much better chance to get a second save during the course of the game. They're going to give you 1 or 2 percentage points. Typically what we think we get out of medic is maybe the information that's gained from save attempts and what that may mean. Of course, you have to believe that that person is actually the medic and that they're giving you true information. But from these data, you can see that the vigilante has a much larger impact on the game than does the medic. The last power role to examine is the cop, and it should be clear to everyone that there's no way to do that. The cop is not a mechanical role, it's strictly an informational role. And again, what the cop provides you is some information or misinformation, depending on whether you believe it or not. But that's an examination of the 3 power roles, and maybe a tad disappointing. The ability to lynch correctly is far more powerful, or to get town to mislynch is far more powerful than anything the power roles can accomplish during the course of the game. The last thing we want to look at is the condition where we have 6 players left. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, there's a community feeling that you should sleep with 6 players left, and we're going to examine that. But first, we ought to say that with 6 players left, town's chance of winning is still at about 46.3%. So you're still fairly balanced at that point, and things haven't changed a lot. What's really fascinating is to notice in the regular flow chart where this occurs, and it only occurs really in one spot. That is, if there's been no intervention from the vigilante or the medic, and there's been no double stacking or anything else, if there are 6 players left, you know for a fact that your day 1 lynch was wrong and your day 2 lynch was correct. And I think that's a really powerful piece of information to keep in your back pocket. Anyway, back to 6 players left. One of the things that is almost common practice at this point is to sleep with 6 players left. And sure enough, what you find when you do sleep is that you gain a couple percentage points, about 3 percentage points, and you're actually back above where you were when you started the game, and that's pretty important. And to break this down a little bit further, you can see that there's 2 circumstances. One where you've got 5 town and 1 mafia, which happens about 43.8% of the time, and 4 town and 2 mafia, which is the rest, 56.3% of the time. And the win percentage of theirs are dramatically different. I mean, if you're at 5 and 1, you've got a pretty good chance for town to win. If it's 4 and 2, not very good chance at all. But sleeping gets you about 3% in both of them. So it isn't like you have to consider which condition you're in to get that 3 percentage point bump. It's the same either way. And so it is better with 6 players left to sleep, but it is nice to know what might have brought you to that point, and that is a day 1 missed lynch and a day 2 correct lynch. There's just one last table that I'll provide for you to look at, but it just gives you the town and mafia win percentages for every town mafia situation. So you can see if there's 7 and 3 left, there's a 33.578% chance the town would win. So you can just get this table as a nice piece of information. Finally, just as a wrap up, if you look at what we learned, if in fact your behaviors were random, town's chance of winning is very, very small. It's the player's skill that actually brings it up to a balanced game. Poor players have a large influence on the game. Being mislynched at any point in the game has a strong effect on the final win percentage. It's much better to randomly kill on day 1 and day 2 than to ever sleep. The vigilante has a small but noticeable effect on the game, especially with a night 1 shot. The medic has a much smaller effect on the game than you might have thought. And finally, sleep with 6 players left. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. Have a good day.